The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then of course the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary Sangiovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Border, Aaron Sweet, El Mahari, and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method,
Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On,
It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Maybury,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbancic of Eight Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again to Defenders Dialogue, brought to you by the Project Entertainment Network. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, we are in the home stretch of Ed Hannigan.
Excelsior, true believer. We are.
Exactly.
One or two more shows worth of Ed Hannigan, and then we get to the new golden era on the Defenders. I am, of course, talking about J.M. DeMatteis and Don Perlin's legendary run.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting to me that now that we're past Tunnel World, we at least have some fun things to talk about in these Hannigan issues. I mean, I hate to put it this way, but let's leave it at that. There are fun things to talk about in these issues by Ed Hannigan.
There are, and you know, if you're a new listener or you listen to these shows out of order, we're not being derogatory towards Mr. Hannigan, okay? But you have to consider, you know, we talked about Steve Gerber's run on this book. It set the tone for so much at Marvel in general. And then David Anthony Kraft, you know, hit and miss, but his hits were really good. Then Hannigan comes in,
right?
And it reads like Silver Age Marvel rather than Bronze Age Marvel.
That's a good point. That's a good comparison. And again, Hannigan, great comics artist. Some of his stuff in the Defenders is really entertaining, but when he gets into the sort of big, long, epic sagas, they're sort of flat and dry.
Right.
But fortunately, as I said, we're beyond those. There are no more of those in these pages. So there is definitely some fun stuff to be had.
Right. Before we get to that, I do want to mention to folks, we have a sponsor this week, Chris.
Oh,
we have a sponsor this week and once a month for the rest of the year. I'm very excited about that. And that is, of course, Serial Box, the HBO for readers. You can start listening or reading today for one monthly fee at serialbox.com. That's SERIAL Box.com. Hey, while you're there, check out Serial Box's upcoming series, Silverwood, The Door, which is brought to you by showrunner Brian Keene, writers Richard Chismar, The Sisters of Slaughter, and Stephen Kozanowski, and director Tony Valenzuela of Black Box TV. So go to serialbox.com and start listening or watching today.
I'm going to do that right now. I'm hanging up. Goodbye.
Hey, you should do that. You can see the trailer for this series that we were working on all year long called Silverwood the Door. You can see the trailer. You can pre-order the first season. It's very, very cool. It's basically like an HBO or Netflix model, but it's audiobooks and prose. So
Very
you know
cool.
you can start this series and you can be reading it on your Kindle or your iPad or whatever, and then you get in the car to drive, and the audio picks up right where you left off. It's actually really amazing technology.
That's very cool. Now, is it your voice reading, Brian?
No,
Oh,
no.
then what's the point? I don't understand the point. Because I don't get enough of your voice.
You don't. Well, you're going to get enough. You're going to get enough now. Court is in session as we begin with Defenders 87, written by court recorder Ed Hannigan, drawn by Don Perlin and the great Pablo Marcos. And if you're wondering why I'm saying court, the title of this issue is called Inquest. And Chris, I don't know about you, but this might be my favorite of the Ed Hannigan run.
Oh, yeah, it is definitely one of my favorites. What I like about this issue, Brian, is that it's a mystery. It is the most Gerber-esque of the things that Hannigan did.
Yes.
Yeah. So go ahead, jump in.
Well, we open with a surveillance team who are secretly, unbeknownst to them, unbeknownst to Valkyrie and Hellcat, spying on Valkyrie and Hellcat as they fly in over Kyle Richmond, a.k.a. Nighthawk's old riding academy.
Formerly the Defenders' headquarters, now ruined by the Fool Killer.
Right. Which you remember took place back in issue 75. Fool Killer actually burned the academy down. So they land in the ruins, and we get a little recap. It's so awesome to see Don Perlin and Pablo Marcos teaming up here. I love the artwork. I love their renditions of Valkyrie and Hellcat. Well, soon enough, they discover these mysterious goons sitting in a car watching them. Right away, I tagged these guys for feds. I think Valkyrie and Hellcat were a little slower on that, but
on the uptake, yeah.
Yeah, they overtake the car, and a fight takes place. One of the government agents fires a flare pistol at Aragorn, which knocks Aragorn out of the sky, and knocks Valkyrie out of the fight, and then they're able to escape. We then transition and find out that this is a report being given by a government agent to a mysterious legal panel.
Now, interestingly, I want to interrupt you for a second and say that, from what I can tell, though, I think government agent is a leap here, because I don't think in this issue we ever learn who is responsible or behind this, although the assumption is easy to make. They're referring to the special tribunal. And as you look at it, as you get deeper into it, we'll talk more about it, but I think there is that moment where there is an assumption that is corrected. So let's get there on it. But
yes, you might be right. I may have misspoke.
Yeah. So the team was trailing the Hulk.
Right.
Yeah. So then they're watching the Hulk from a helicopter, and the Hulk rests. And again, we haven't really mentioned this, Brian, or maybe we did in passing last episode. But they're using. Oh, we did talk about it. They're using the model. How they're
using Banner a lot more.
Exactly, the model of the TV series where when the Hulk rests or falls asleep, he becomes Banner again, which was not a thing that happened on a regular basis until the TV series.
Right.
So then there is
for all those who complain about, Marvel Comics rewriting their continuity to match the success of the movies that are out right now. Mm-hmm. This shit was happening back in the 70s and 80s as well.
Exactly. So whoever this special tribunal is, they definitely have the U.S. military working with them in some capacity. Whether the military knows who they're really working for or not. They send some soldiers to capture Bruce Banner. They're about to put some kind of gas tank with a face mask on him. And one of the soldiers trips and falls onto Banner. And of course, that results in Banner turning into the Hulk and trashing their helicopter and other military transport.
That's right. We then transition once again back to this mysterious tribunal.
And I'm sure, Brian, this was a very happy moment for you.
Da-da-da-da! One of my favorite defenders. Jack Norris, former husband to Valkyrie's host body, Barbara Norris, former agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., who single-handedly helped the defenders take down the threat of Scorpio. He's back, and he's appearing before the tribunal. They're swearing him in. We then get a really well-done recap in just a couple panels of, his troubles with Valkyrie, his antagonism with Nighthawk, his going undercover, being kidnapped by S.H.I.E.L.D., being drugged, Nick Fury releasing him, all that. And we then transition back to Valkyrie and Hellcat.
Now I think they're in the Kyle Richmond's building where they've been living recently. And Kyle comes in a suit. So they're trying to figure out where the Hulk is, and that's what's happening. And Hellcat's asking him how his legal hassles are going. He's saying, the government investigation into his finances is ongoing. And then they hear a news report. Handily, the good thing about searching for the Hulk is that eventually the news will report his whereabouts. And he's going to break shit.
Yeah, this time he's near the New Jersey Meadowlands, where he's fighting the National Guard.
Exactly. Brian, a moment from the ads in this issue. There is a page here, an advertisement for the new X-Men. That would be the Len Wein and then Chris Claremont return of the X-Men. Like the original X-Men, then you'll love the new X-Men, on sale monthly, still uncanny after all these years. And this ad is actually specifically for Chris Claremont, John Byrne, and Terry Austin on X-Men.
What a historic ad that is.
Yeah, exactly. So just to set the stage for where we are in Marvel continuity at this point.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Exactly.
We then get another witness in front of this tribunal, and this is somebody we should spend some time on, Chris.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about Hellcat's and Patsy Walker's place in the Marvel Universe. She is one of their oldest characters. She dates back to the original Human Torch and Submariner and Captain America as far as that goes. She was she used to be in a comic, just Patsy Walker, and she had adventures as a model. Then, of course, Bronze Age Marvel, they reinvent her as the Cat, and then Hellcat. But we haven't talked about her time in the Avengers, and we haven't talked about her ex-husband, Buzz Baxter, retired Air Force colonel. We find out that Buzz is now reporting before this tribunal. I should mention Buzz will feature in this comic later on, near the end of J.M. DeMatteis's run.
Yep.
So you want to recap there basically they recap what happened in an issue of the Avengers, but
the most important thing to know about Buzz Baxter is he's talking about Patsy Walker and their history, and he's giving his version of how he got back from Vietnam. And he'd had a taste of the way the world really was, he says, but he couldn't convince Patsy that that's the way things were. Just when I needed her support the most, he says, she up and left me, divorced. This is Buzz's version, but we'll find out Buzz was actually violent and abusive toward Patsy.
That's right. But, props to Hannigan. I mean, we've slagged on Hannigan some, but the writing here is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this whole issue is really well executed. And it just shows you that what this issue is that's different, Brian, is it's about the characters. Right. Instead of Hannigan, spinning out one of his enormous fantasy epics, that we said before that you could swap you, me, and Mary into one of the stories and it wouldn't matter. This issue really is focused on who the characters are. Everything that happens proceeds from characterization first. And so, again, you get something that is a really good comic.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it recaps Patsy finding her costume.
Yeah, we get basically it's Avengers 144 to 149. And, he talks about how they were high school sweethearts. As Chris said, he gets back from Nam, and Patsy's head, in his opinion, is still full of the fairy tale ideals of her protected childhood. Just when I needed her support the most, she up and left me, divorced. Ordinary men weren't enough for her. She wanted superheroes, and she sought them out. Now, he says that he went on to work for the Brand Corporation. If you're an old Marvel fan like us, of course, you know the Brand Corporation. They're right up there with Roxxon as far as evil corporations in the Marvel universe.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was where Hank McCoy was working when he developed the serum that turned him from the original ordinary, beast from the original X-Men to the hirsute blue bestial beast. I shouldn't say bestial beast, but you know what I'm saying. Which was a great story. And that it was about the same time that we had the original miniseries, The Claws of the Cat, which featured Greer Nelson, who was the original Cat, who wore this same costume, who later became Tigra. And
That's
then
right.
Patsy Walker found the Cat's costume and became Hellcat. So just to have that backstory reiterated.
Right. The real quick recap of the rest, but something I do want to touch on because it's going to come up in future issues. So the Brand Corps captures the Avengers. Now, this is the classic Avengers lineup, very similar to what you see on movie screens right now. Hellcat frees the Avengers. She gets in a fight with her ex-husband, claws his face, permanently scars him. So he tells all this to the Tribunal. It's curious that the Tribunal even says, I'm sure you told your story the way you believe it happened. Even they are skeptical.
Right.
And he says, her ex-husband says, I'm not the only one she's mistreated. Do you know her mother is terminally ill and Patsy never visits her?
Right.
And they say, yes, that's in the record.
And anybody who watches the Defenders TV series on Netflix is well aware, and we'll see more of this, actually, of Patsy's mother. And then we get back to Jack Norris, Brian. And
because Jack has had enough of this misogynist bullshit.
Yeah, and then this is where we get the exchange, and Jack Norris is raving. It says, "Is this the kind of justice our government dispenses?" And the gentleman on the tribunal says, "Mr. Norris, this tribunal never claimed to be connected with the government." And then Jack just assumed, and then basically they say, "Why don't you take a short nap?" And basically Jack passes out. So in some way, this tribunal is controlling Jack. Now, Brian, I don't want to give too much away, and I'd like to ask you something because we're doing this reread. It's been years since I read them. Does this tribunal connect to the Secret Empire?
It does.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, there are two tribunals that pop up in the Avengers. One of them is related to Elf with a Gun.
Right.
And we will get to that much later in J.M. DeMatteis's run.
Okay.
The other is, of course, related to the Secret Empire. If you're a longtime Marvel fan, you should be familiar with who the Secret Empire is. If not, basically, it's Marvel's version of the New World Order. It's everything that lunatics like Alex Jones scream about on the radio.
Exactly. And in fact, we'll get really connected to the Secret Empire in the pages of the Defenders later, including a character who becomes a Defender who's long forgotten by Marvel and Marvel fans alike, called Cloud. Yep. Who originates with the Secret Empire, but we'll come back to that.
But speaking of bad guys, while Jack is knocked out,
Brian, I'm basically stalling so we don't have to talk about these losers.
I told you they show up in the Defenders again later on. But yeah, our next witness is a group. It's Shocker. and his pals Lifter, Burner, Slither, and Peeper, otherwise known as Mutant Force.
I don't know why they never had their own series. My favorite is Peeper. Everybody Google Peeper from Marvel Mutant Force, and you'll see what.
When we first talked about him, I said he looked like one of the Mole Man's little mole people.
Exactly. Or Marty Feldman at his prime.
Yeah, but, Shocker, he basically, he says, hey, now that we work for the government, we're here, and basically we get a recap of Defenders 78 through 80, and then we transition to the Hulk, who is fighting parachute men,
a.k.a. Mutant Force, who have parachuted down to attack the Hulk.
Yep.
Then we see Valkyrie and Hellcat arriving to stop this battle, and I just want to fast forward to later on that page, Brian, where we see is that Buzz? I'm not sure here. And Jack Norris is waking up from being knocked out, and the members of Mutant Force are at the table next to him. And the guy in Mutant Force who has the mechanical crab claws, it's just so stupid looking. I just can't get over how stupid looking that is.
That's Shocker. He's the leader of Mutant Force.
It's just so stupid looking.
Mechanical crab claws for hands.
And why? I mean, it's so stupid looking.
All the better to shock people with.
It's the kind of thing that, like, in the 90s, Rob Liefeld would have designed that, and somebody would have said, but why does he have... Because it's cool, man! So that's the thing that I just can't... I'm looking at that, I just can't. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, we've got Patsy's ex-husband, Jack Norris, and the members of Mutant Force, all sitting at the table. We find out that Patsy's ex-husband was actually in charge of air operations during this incident they're recapping with the Hulk. Jack wakes up and, Shocker is like, this Norris clown is waking up from whatever whammy the judge put on him. And the tribunal asks them to proceed with the narrative. So then we get more pages of Hulk fighting Mutant Force. And when that story wraps up, Jack has once again had enough. He says, I can't believe you're talking about shooting down the Defenders as if they were murderers. You act as though it were a conspiracy to overthrow the government. And the tribunal has had quite enough of Jack Norris. They say if he can't maintain a modicum of decorum, and Jack interrupts and says, bullshit. Well, in the comics, he says, bull. You have to let the Defenders' side be told, and if they can't be here to defend themselves, I'll do it. And you're not putting me to sleep again. I won't be held against my will. And they say, we're not holding you against your will. You can leave whenever you want. They point him to the door. Jack goes through the door, ends up in a back alley, and then when he turns around, poof, the door has disappeared, and he decides he has to warn the Defenders. But what is he warning them against?
Exactly. What is he warning them against? He doesn't know, and neither do we. But maybe Ed Hannigan knows. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
So issue 88 is the cover is sadly marred by a giant Toys R Us ad across the top.
Yes.
But this issue is subtitled Hulk, Prince of Wales, Whales. And with a little tag that underneath it says, don't let the title fool you. It's a blockbuster. So apparently the editors didn't like the title. There must have been some disagreement there. But issue 88, once again by the team of Hannigan, Perlin, and Marcos. They're at Kyle Richmond's Long Island aerospace plant. Because, of course, he has an aerospace plant.
Just in case you forgot that Kyle is a millionaire.
Yeah. So Valkyrie is holding up their the little ship that she and Hellcat have been flying around in while they're repairing it. And then we get this. This is an interesting issue, but the interest in the issue doesn't have a lot to do with Hellcat and Valkyrie, Brian. But I will mention that Hellcat is flirting with a worker.
Yeah, it's back to that characterization of her that I just find so grating.
Exactly.
I get so annoyed, and I don't understand why she's on this team when she's written like this. She basically ends up flirting with every construction worker there, and in the process, one of the guys she's flirting with falls off this steel girder, stories above the ground, and he's falling to his death. And Nighthawk, who is out of costume, he's just Kyle Richmond, has to rely on acrobatics alone to save this guy.
Yep, exactly. And that was a fun scene, actually, because it reminds you that before he had the suit, or before he had the jetpack in the suit, that he was fighting crime just with his athletic prowess, etc.
It also reminds you that Patsy Walker, a.k.a. Hellcat, is annoying until Jam Mattis starts.
You and I disagree on this. I always loved Hellcat. I always found her pretty amusing. But then we get a weird, this sort of weird thing, which is for issues and issues and issues and story arcs, we've been following in the background this thing where Kyle Richmond is not able to become Nighthawk because of all of his legal troubles.
And then it's wrapped up in 3 panels.
He gets a phone call from his lawyer. I got Matt Murdock to help on the finer points, so we have a little 1-panel cameo of Matt Murdock, a.k.a. Daredevil.
That's right, helping out his fellow defenders.
Exactly. And now the injunction is lifted. He can be Nighthawk again in his new version of his Nighthawk costume. And he's filled with joy, Brian. He takes to the air. Valkyrie's flying in the ship with Hellcat because Aragorn was injured by the tribunal goons in the last issue.
That's right. Remember, they fired a flare gun at him. We then transition to 20 miles offshore of Long Island's Hamptons, where a motor yacht registered to Kyle Richmond Enterprises lies anchored, a yacht that is, to all appearances, bereft of life. But those appearances can be deceiving because there is one passenger on board the yacht, and that is Dr. Bruce Banner, a fugitive from the law.
Yep. Now, here's an interesting thing I want to point out, because as silly as this is, I actually really like this story, even though it's completely ridiculous. However, I would like to point out that it relies entirely on Bruce Banner remembering the Hulk's experiences.
Which never, ever happens.
Exactly. I was like, what? How is that possible? But suffice to say, folks, suspend your disbelief even further than is normally required.
Because Bruce remembers that back in Defenders issue 75, Hulk rescued a beached whale. And
exactly.
As he's thinking about that, a whale shows up. And
exactly.
He starts talking to it.
Yep. And it says, I must be going soft talking to a whale. What? He's turned and charging the yacht. So he charges the yacht, bumps into it. Bruce Banner falls into the ocean without becoming the Hulk. And the whale comes up beneath him and lifts him up out of the water. I just can't. This story is so silly, but it's really fun.
It turns out there's a Soviet, because back then Russia was still engaged in whaling. I don't think they are anymore.
Right.
But there's a Soviet factory ship surrounded by harpoon-equipped killer launches, and they are butchering whales by the hundreds. And Bruce figures out this is the whale that the Hulk saved back in issue 75.
That he can't possibly remember, but somehow he does.
And not only that, but the whale was saved by the Hulk, but it somehow recognizes that Bruce Banner is the Hulk.
Exactly.
And it has bumped him off the yacht to bring him here to stop the Russians from slaughtering its people.
And the funny thing is that even in the context of this series, people listening to this, I imagine some of you might think that we're making this up. We're not making this up. So this whale, it conveniently is in the same location as Bruce Banner on Kyle Richmond's yacht, recognizes Bruce Banner as the Hulk, as Brian just said, bumps the yacht, knocking Bruce Banner into the ocean, and then lifts Bruce Banner out of the water and takes him to help his fellow whales.
And the whale gets its wish because Bruce turns into the Hulk. So, puny men are killing whales. But Hulk remembers that whales are like Hulk. Only whales can't fight back, but Hulk can.
I know, it's just the best. I mean, it's like an episode of a cartoon. Like, this would have happened in a Saturday morning cartoon.
Absolutely.
Yep. And it would have made total and complete sense at the time. All right, so Valkyrie and Hellcat and the ship show up on the yacht, and they're investigating the disappearance of Bruce Banner, who is not there, and they find his sunglasses because somehow Hellcat recognizes Bruce Banner's sunglasses.
Right. Then we transition to a hospital in New Jersey, where Patsy Walker's mother has had some sort of relapse. Now, you'll remember that we said last issue she was terminally ill. Well, she's had some kind of relapse, and I don't know how much do we want to say about this. There's something going on with her, and she's sinking fast. Probably won't last the night. Does anyone know how to reach her daughter?
Right. Yeah, and then she doesn't want to stay. So what happens is that Dorothy Walker keeps going to the hospital and then checking herself out, apparently. The doctor says, look, we can't keep her against her will. Dorothy Walker is cantankerous and manipulative. She manages to convince the staff that the doctors have it in for her. So the doctor's arguing with an EMT because they brought her in again. Then we cut back to the Hulk attacking the Soviet vessel that's killing whales. We actually have, if I'm looking at this correctly, a dead whale being stripped of its skin on board the ship. Yeah. That's pretty grim.
Now, I'm reading this in the Marvel Essential Defenders Volume 4, which is black and white. Do they show that in color?
The whole central portion of the whale is red because the skin has been stripped off.
I'm surprised they got that by the Comics Code.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because the Comics Code was still something they had to buff up against back then.
Yeah, well, apparently, Soviet on whale violence wasn't one of the things forbidden by the code.
Valkyrie and Hellcat, they show up. They try to get Hulk to calm down. Sure, we can talk this out, but Hulk knows what comes of talking. Men will promise to stop. Then as soon as Hulk leaves, they will start killing his friends again. Men use machines, bombs, guns, and chains, but Hulk can smash all of men's puny machines. And Valkyrie agrees with her big green friend.
Yeah, and here's again the thing that I just think is so silly, because they're hunting the whales clearly as whalers. They're using them for whatever the commercial purposes of this are. And then Valkyrie says, "Is this true?" And one of the sailors one of the Soviet sailors says, "Well, the captain says, we do it to live. It is our job." And one of the sailors says, "Ha, that is only his excuse. Everyone knows he hates the whales." And then the captain says, "Don't listen to him. Vasily is a misfit and a traitor."
I hunt the whales for Mother Russia, as did my father, and his father before him, and I feel no shame. But it is true, I have reason to consider whales my enemies. For when I was young, like Vasily, we hunted the whales, but it was different. And he goes on to talk about, back then they didn't have the machines, and many men lost their lives or were injured, as was he. His entire crew was slaughtered in a death struggle with a sperm whale, and the scar that he bears reminds him every day of that carnage. Therefore, the whales will always be his enemies.
Yeah, and Hulk says, "Then Hulk is your enemy too." In any case, then there's an explosive harpoon that one of the Soviets shoots at Hulk. The Hulk basically holes the hull, and the whole ship is sinking. The Defender's air car falls into the water. So there you go. So that everyone's escaping in the lifeboats, including Valkyrie and Hellcat. And Valkyrie tries to get Hulk to go in the lifeboats as well. He refuses, and then the same Ahab-esque Soviet captain is in the lifeboat with Valkyrie and Hellcat, swearing his lifelong enmity to the Hulk. In Russian, of course.
Exactly. We then transition to Manhattan, where Kyle Richmond is very, very joyously flying around as Nighthawk once again. He's on his way to his lawyer's office when, and keep in mind, this was 1980, I believe, so this predates September 11th by several decades. But he encounters a jet airliner flying very, very low over Manhattan, and he decides to investigate. He flies up to the cockpit and finds out that it is a hijacking in progress.
Yeah, it's interesting. So he, we'll make it quick and say he saves the day by ripping a hole in the top of with the lasers in his titanium talons in the top of the plane, and he goes in and he retakes control of the plane, except one of the hijackers is in the cockpit with a grenade, as they would be. There you go. The grenade explodes. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, the plane's starting to go down, and they all they can do is try to glide it with the wing flaps and direct it towards the river. But like Nighthawk, Sully. Yeah, like Sully. Nighthawk, because he can fly, he gets out and he pushes the tail in the same direction that the plane is falling, like steering a car into a skid to bring it out. And it works.
Yeah, which is, again, this is completely beyond Nighthawk's power set. But, I think that Ed Hannigan probably was like, well, I haven't really done anything with Nighthawk except have him whine about his troubles with the government. So let me give him his little side superheroic adventure. Right.
You do get an interesting thing here from Kyle. He says, I've thought all along that my new jetpack and added gizmos put me close to the Iron Man class.
Yeah.
But Stark probably could have done this all with one hand tied behind his back. I find that an interesting bit of characterization. Here you have these two millionaire playboy characters in the Marvel Universe, Tony Stark, a.k.a. Iron Man, and Kyle Richmond, a.k.a. Nighthawk. And Nighthawk's a little envious of Stark.
Yeah. It's sort of like the Hawkeye-Captain America dynamic, where Hawkeye knows he'll just never be in Captain America's league.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's also interesting that when he's being interviewed after saving the day, the reporter calls him Nightwing. No, that's Nighthawk, Miss Tolliver.
So, Chris, so far, Hannigan has done a commendable job with this issue. I mean, if you overlook the whole Banner remembering the Hulk's actions and the Whale recognizing that Banner is the Hulk, etc. But here he flubs. Because we go
back.
Does
he though? Come on now. I think this is exactly what this issue needs.
And keep in mind, they're 20 miles off the Hamptons.
And I don't know what you're complaining about, Brian. I really don't. But go ahead.
First of all, here's something that just occurred to me as we're talking about this. The Russians were whaling 20 miles off the Hamptons. Well, that is U.S. territorial waters. So the Russians were whaling in U.S. waters.
Yeah, there you go. See, really the Hulk prevented World War III at that point.
Apparently. But what he did not prevent is the giant squid that suddenly rises up out of the water 20 miles off the Hamptons.
I really feel like at this point,
in the lifeboats.
I feel like at this point, if we said, hey folks, we've made up this entire issue, none of this is actually in the comic, people would believe that more than they... But no, indeed, this is Defenders 88. The giant squid comes up and attacks the lifeboats. And Valkyrie is knocked into the water by the giant squid. But fortunately, Brian, Valkyrie is saved because Hulk's best buddy, his team-up partner, the sperm whale from issue 75 or whatever it was, comes up out of the water with Hulk riding its back and Valkyrie sitting beside him.
But you forgot to tell people how they defeat the giant squid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They throw bottles of vodka at it.
Of course, which is a sacrifice.
Because they're Russians. Of course they have vodka on the lifeboat.
On the lifeboat, exactly. They saved themselves and their vodka. I just don't. But again, and the funny thing is we're laughing and laughing, but I enjoy this issue. I think this issue is really fun. Anyway, Hulk and his whale friends, this is Hulk's dialogue, have saved Valkyrie, and now Valkyrie wants Hulk to save puny men. And the captain says, "What, me? To be saved by the very monsters I hate?" And then we finally have the moment, the epiphany. And yet, maybe the green-skinned one is right. Times have changed, and the sea is no longer a place for such as I. The battle against the whale is no longer a fit contest for men. My heart, it just breaks. It just breaks, Brian.
And, we would end on that note, except there's a denouement. Nighthawk finally, after saving the airplane from the hijackers, gets to his lawyer's office. His lawyer is there, so is Matt Murdock, a.k.a. his fellow defender, Daredevil. And it turns out that after the lawyer called Kyle, he received a summons. The grand jury is going to go ahead and indict him for fiscal malfeasance, income tax evasion, and half a dozen other crimes. So, next issue, the defenders face the biggest foe of all, the IRS.
But in actuality, it's a death in the family.
That's right.
And I'd like to
89.
note. I'd like to note that this issue's cover and the next several issues covers all have Daredevil as one of the heads in the upper left-hand corner. So in recent issues from Ed Hannigan, we've seen the return of Black Panther to the Defenders ranks and the return of Daredevil to the Defenders ranks. And this issue 89, Death in the Family, is co-plotted by David Anthony Kraft, making his return to the Defenders with Hannigan scripting, and Don Perlin and Pablo Marcus again on the art.
Right.
Excuse me.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Okay.
I'm just choked up from all the whale stuff.
We open with a fun splash page. We have Hellcat and Valkyrie in costume, and they are bringing an exhausted Bruce Banner back to a penthouse owned by Kyle Richmond. And Banner is, of course, passed out in the arms of Valkyrie, and we have this little old white lady out walking her dog, and she thinks to herself, "My goodness, this women's liberation thing has certainly gotten out of hand. That's not how I got dates when I was."
I loved that. That was great. And again, this is like more character stuff. I mean, this is the thing I like about it, So, in the penthouse, Kyle's lawyer, Milton Rosenblum, is slowly but surely losing his mind because basically the government is seizing, the IRS has probable cause to suspect fiscal hanky-panky, I believe that's a legal term, aplenty in Richmond's activities. He's being investigated by the FBI, his finances by the SEC, and a grand jury has handed down an indictment for stock fraud. So basically, the IRS is seizing his apartment and his assets.
Now, Chris, how old were we when we read these?
Oh, 12 or 13, I think.
12 or 13. I know that stock fraud and tax evasion and IRS, that's what I wanted to read about when I was 12 or 13.
Well, we learned important words in this issue, though, Brian.
I guess.
Because the lawyer has a hissy and kicks a table and says, "Blast you parasitic jackanapes."
The IRS.
That's a word we don't hear enough. Jackanape. I think we should.
You know what?
We should,
I think we should both use jackanapes in our next novels.
Exactly. In fact, that's the title of my next book, Jackanapes.
Yeah. So
and they're crossbred jackals with apes.
Jackanape would make a great comic book villain.
It would. It would. All right. In any case.
So Hellcat, Valkyrie, and Banner show up. They interrupt, and then the phone rings, and Kyle answers, and it turns out it's Clea.
Clea is
Kyle
calling with very sad news.
Yeah, he grabs Patsy by the shoulders, and he says, "That was Clea at Dr. Strange's house. It was the last address anyone had for you, and she got a call from the hospital." Basically, he informs her that Hellcat's mother passed away the night before.
Yeah, and I thought this was an interesting thing. They go to Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, and it says, as is often the case in times of anguish, the men and women withdraw silently into separate groups. I like watching old movies and things, Brian, because it's always interesting to get the perspective of the era.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting perspective of the era. Anyway, Clea is gently reminding Hellcat that they need to make arrangements for the mother's burial, but the lawyer Rosenblum has offered to take care of most of it. So then we go, it's just this moment, this aftermath. But interestingly, there's a bit of business that Hannigan wants to take care of at this point before we. I think he must know that he's winding down at this point. So basically, Hellcat asks Valkyrie to wear her Valkyrie uniform, her original Asgardian uniform, a.k.a. her original costume in Marvel Comics continuity, because the Valkyries chose the worthy to ascend to heaven. And as horrible as Dorothy Walker was as a human being, Patsy somehow wants to honor her mother in this way. Valkyrie doesn't know how to restore herself to her original uniform, but fortunately Clea is the one who did it for her in the first place, so she restores her back to her original Norse garb.
And you think that was Hannigan?
Oh, no, you're right. It must have been Kraft.
I think that's Kraft. I think that has Kraft written all over it.
Yeah.
That touch, and I like that touch.
Yeah, me too.
As much as I liked Valkyrie's new uniform, I thought it was it didn't have the boob window. You know what I mean? But it is
one,
nice
as much
to see her.
As much as we want pants, and as silly as the boob armor is, the original costume does have a more iconic look to it. In any case,
so we then get Matt Murdock, and now keep in mind Matt Murdock is blind. I know we don't cover Daredevil on this show, but we have covered Daredevil's appearances in the Defenders. Remember that he's a Defender. He is at another one of Kyle's sealed up penthouses. The IRS has taken everything. They've sealed Kyle's properties. He's knocking on the door. He's looking for Rosenblum, who said he would meet Matt Murdock there. And we find out that on the roof of that building, we see some familiar bad guys.
Oh, boy. Just when I was enjoying a few issues of Ed Hannigan's, we have the return, Brian, of
the Mandrill's Femme Force.
Oh, I didn't even want to say it. I didn't want to say the words. The Mandrill, let's not forget, the Mandrill whom Ed Hannigan has deemed the arch nemesis of the Defenders. Oh, boy. So, Daredevil has broken into this penthouse apartment that's been sealed by the IRS, and then Femme Force smashes through the windows and walls, and there's a fight with Daredevil.
Right. Keep in mind, Mandrill got his start as a Daredevil villain. He was part of Daredevil's Rogues Gallery, so I am glad at least that Hannigan and Kraft had the presence of mind to bring Daredevil back into the Defenders for this final showdown with them.
Yeah.
FemForce, they take down Daredevil. They shoot him with a tranquilizer. And Mandrill appears and says he wants him alive to lead them to the other defenders. So they carry Daredevil off.
I also appreciate the fact that Mandrill says the other defenders, reminding readers that Daredevil is indeed a member.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We then transition graveside. Now, I wanna bring up this panel here, Chris. Don Perlin on art. The defenders showing genuine emotion, distraught. These are not superheroes; these are human beings. This is a precursor to what we're going to have throughout J.M. DeMatteis's entire run with Don Perlin. I think the two of them just complemented each other so well, writing and art. And even though DeMatteis isn't writing this, we see that storytelling start to develop here in this panel with Perlin. I'm sure Hannigan and Kraft didn't have all that emotion in their script. It probably just said, the defenders are by Dorothy Walker's grave. But you can see what Perlin did here with the art. I mean, even the background characters, just look at their expressions. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I have to say, Brian, as much as you dislike Patsy, this is a moment where we start to really, in the last issue and this issue, we start to get, in the old Patsy Walker comics, her mother was not a monster.
Right.
And you're getting something very interesting here. So it's Bruce Banner, Kyle Richmond, Patsy is on her knees in front of the gravestone, crying into the flowers that she's brought. Valkyrie is there along with a priest and a couple of other folks. And as everybody walks away, leaving Patsy a moment to say her private farewells, she lays the flowers and she says, "You wouldn't have wanted me to cry, Mom. You always told me to not to cry, to act like a grown-up, whether you were dragging me to the modeling school or an agency. I guess that's part of the reason we never got along. You wanted me to be perfect, the ideal daughter, something I could never live up to. Well, I'm crying now, Mom, and you can't stop me. All you can do is try to forgive me like I've tried to forgive you." So really interesting, I think, that that they're going here. And again, I'm sure this is Kraft, and Hannigan is scripting, so doing a good job with that.
We should also point out we also get introduced to Patsy's mother's housekeeper, Dolly Donahue,
right,
an elderly lady
who will become a major character in the Defenders.
I was going to say she becomes a major character, major love interest of a Defender who has not yet debuted in the series.
Right.
So it's important that we point her out to readers. This is her first appearance in the book.
Yeah.
She will basically become the new Jack Norris.
Yeah. In fact, Dolly, I would say, is the Defenders' Jarvis in many ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, so very interesting to see Dolly show up here. Dolly is an older woman, and yeah, actually one of the best supporting characters in the whole series, as we'll see
agree.
As we go. But that said, so Kyle has a court date tomorrow. Rosenblum, the attorney, was at the little graveside service here. So Kyle has his court date tomorrow. Then we get this splash page of the neighborhood where the Walker house, the new Defenders headquarters, is located. And it's basically, go ahead.
Think about that. It's located in this small suburban New Jersey town.
Yep.
Now, think back to previous episodes of this show and previous issues of the Defenders, particularly the Headman saga, where the Defenders trashed a suburban neighborhood, not once, not twice, but 3 times in their pursuit of the Headman. Yep. And they now think, hey, Patsy inherited her mother's house. Let's make that our new headquarters.
Yeah, there's the house that backs up to it. It shows like the grid where they live with the streets named on like a map, like Google Maps, basically. And the house behind Patsy's house has a little above ground pool. There's a a supermarket, and I looked at this.
Home.
Yeah, and all I thought when I looked at this was, oh, this is a disaster waiting to happen. There's a hospital block away. That's a good sign, though. Oh my god! And Patsy says the backyard has plenty of room to keep Aragorn.
Oh. I never realized it, but can I tell a quick aside? How are we doing on time?
Yeah,
I pitched. You remember Kazar?
Kazar, yeah.
For those who don't know, he was Marvel's version of Tarzan, and he had a pet saber-toothed tiger named Zabu. I had pitched a Max series back in the day for Kazar, which involved him and his wife Shauna moving to Paramus, New Jersey, because they had a kid and they didn't want to raise their kid in the savage land where dinosaurs lived. Shauna gets a job as a real estate agent. Kazar can't find a job because what's he qualified to do? And there was a whole subplot with Zabu being kept in the backyard and getting into shenanigans with the little toy poodle next door. I can only think that subconsciously I must have gotten that idea from reading this issue when I was 12 years old.
That's awesome. I would read just the Zabu miniseries.
Yeah, unfortunately, Marvel didn't see the magic in that, so I never got it greenlit. But
I would read that if done in the style of Beasts of Burden, the Dark Horse comic from Evan Dorkin.
Oh, yeah.
Zabu patrolling the suburban neighborhood where he's not supposed to be. That's a good one.
But they're going to keep a winged horse in the backyard in the suburbs of New Jersey.
Exactly. So they go to Patsy's house. They're going through the house. Mrs. Walker sunk every penny into this house when she moved here from California. She always wanted Patsy to have it since the money came from the royalties from her magazines. And then I don't know if it's Banner or Kyle. I think it's Kyle saying, royalties, magazines. It is Kyle actually, and Patsy takes Kyle up into the attic, and he says, "Is it my imagination, Patsy, or does Mrs. Donahue seem to be trying to make you feel guilty about something?" So basically, it's Kyle. So it's Patsy talking about the magazines. They're showing the hundreds of Patsy Walker magazines and comics, and
so basically it's a meta thing.
Right.
We talked about how the old Patsy Walker comics existed in Marvel continuity. Now they've been retconned here. That they were fictional comics and magazines her mother had done based on her real life daughter Patsy Walker.
Right. And she says sometimes she thinks that her mother couldn't tell the difference between the real Patsy and the fictional Patsy. She says she was the ultimate stage mother, and she was the Brooke Shields of her day. Brooke Shields, for those of you who don't know, is an actress who began life as a young model, and Mom's friend, Millie the model, tried to get her jobs showing children's fashion. So that's another interesting retcon.
Right.
And Patsy said she was more interested in being a tomboy. Yeah. So basically, she says she rebelled against her mother's controlling ways by marrying Buzz Baxter. And then she says Buzz was a stinker. And this is the first time we get, I guess that's one thing Mom was right about. But Buzz was too controlling. So that once she got divorced, she cut herself off from her old world as much as possible, hooked up with the Avengers, and here we are again.
That's right. We then transition to one of my favorite scenes ever in the Defenders. And you know what? I owe Ed Hannigan and David Anthony Kraft an apology. I thought, when you and I first started doing this show, I thought this scene occurred during Steve Gerber's run.
Right.
And when we didn't get to it, I thought, oh, well, it must have been during DeMatteis's run.
Yep.
I was wrong. It's this issue. And we begin with Dolly and Bruce Banner in the kitchen. And, Dolly sends Valkyrie out for groceries because...
in full costume. In full costume, let's say.
Yeah, there's nothing in the fridge. She's now got to cook for the Defenders. She's going to make dinner for the Defenders. So Valkyrie goes out to the grocery store in full costume. And then Dolly realizes that Valkyrie doesn't have any money on her. So she hands Bruce some cash, and Bruce Banner goes, running out of the house after Valkyrie and encounters one of those 1970s multicultural street gangs.
Yeah, that Marvel Comics is famous for, usually for giving shit to the Thing, but here, one of these street toughs trips Bruce Banner as he's running after Valkyrie.
And, you know, I want to explain to our younger readers who might think that joke is off color or out of taste. It's not. This is how Marvel always depicted street gangs. They were, say what you will about diversity in comics in the 70s and 80s, but one thing that was inclusive was their depiction of street gangs.
Yes, yeah. They're always a bunch of, asshole guys hanging around on the street for no reason. Always multicultural because they didn't want to have, just a Latino or just a black group. So there were always a very multicultural group of people who would then pick on one of our heroes. Oh, so silly. Anyway, of course, what happens, Brian, when you trip Bruce Banner in the street? It's only a matter of time until we
turn into the Hulk. So we've got this street tough with his shoe under Banner's chin, lifting up Banner's head. And by the time he gets it up, it's the Hulk. And Hulk doesn't like smelly shoe in his face. Maybe Hulk will smash shoe with foot in it.
Oh my God. That's one of the best. I want that t-shirt. Hulk doesn't like smelly shoe in his face. Then he gets confused because he goes across to try to complete the job of finding Valkyrie at the supermarket. And the automatic doors open.
The automatic doors fuddle the Hulk.
What?
Bah, doors open for Hulk? Bah, stupid door must be afraid of Hulk.
Oh, then we... There's a woman coming out and she says, she thinks, thank heavens, I hope this was all just a dream when I saw the food prices.
Then we get this brilliant panel by Perlin. It's an overview of the grocery store. So you see the aisles. You see Hulk going down one aisle, Valkyrie going up another aisle. Hulk is confounded by this. Huh? Hulk thought he just saw Valkyrie here, but now she is gone. And Valkyrie, keeping in mind from Asgard, is kind of stunned, walking through the aisle, pushing a cart like a zombie, thinking, such a bewildering array of brightly colored packages. How do the Earth people know which products are the ones they need?
Yeah. And then I've managed to locate a couple of items, but what in the name of Hela is Cool Whip? Or this other notation, Wonder Bread. Perhaps it is some kind of enchanted. So she thinks Wonder Bread is magical. And then, of course, if you have a superhero in a supermarket or convenience store or liquor store, invariably someone is going to try to rob it.
So these guys try to rob it. They try to rob Valkyrie of her money, and she faces off against them, and then the Hulk shows up and says, "Give guns to Hulk, little men." He takes all their guns, and the manager, has one of the checkout girls call the police, and when Hulk hears that the police are coming, he says he's going to leave because police never understand Hulk, always think Hulk is bad. But Hulk is still hungry. And Valkyrie has lost her shopping list. She no longer knows what to get. Well, Hulk knows what to get.
This is the
beans.
best.
Lots of beans. And here's my favorite 2-page spread from the Defenders ever.
Yeah.
You see the Hulk filling the shopping cart with all the beans.
Baked beans.
Yeah. He then dumps all the cans of baked beans out on the checkout counter. They ring him up. It's $38.59 for a shopping cart filled with cans of baked beans.
Valkyrie says, "Oh no, I forgot. I haven't any money." And
Hulk
says,
"Hulk has money. Hulk knows all about money. Here is money." Thunk, and he smashes the checkout register by slamming the money down on it.
The cash Dolly had given to Bruce Banner, which somehow Hulk has managed to keep hold of.
But they're $15 short. And the manager says, so what? Hulk's a hero. He deserves it after stopping the robbery. Besides, who's going to tell him he's short?
Yeah. And then the all-time great panel
This is what I want on a shirt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Later, the Defenders sit down to their first meal in their new headquarters, a less than festive meal, but memorable nonetheless. You see Hulk with a punch bowl filled with baked beans, eating them with a ladle, and he says, beans are good. Hulk loves beans.
And Kyle is thinking,
not so much.
Kyle's thinking, yeah, so you told us. Yuck. So basically, everyone else at the table hates baked beans. Hellcat just says, gee, I really don't think I can hold down another serving. And Dolly says, well, get used to it. The big green glute bought about a year's supply. So for the next year, the Defenders will be eating nothing but baked beans.
Yep. I remember my oldest, of course, we've had Dungeon Master appear on the show. He's 10. My oldest son, David, who does not mind his real name being out there, he's what is he this year? 26. And I remember showing him this panel when he was little, and he was delighted by that. And it was how I got him to eat baked beans. He wouldn't eat them until he saw Hulk eating baked beans. And then that's all he wanted for dinner was baked beans.
Yeah, and then after he has his baked bean dinner, Dolly has Nighthawk fly up to the roof to fix the antenna for the TV. And when he comes back inside, nobody was watching the TV except the Hulk, and Hulk had so much baked beans that he's passed out in the chair in front of the television.
Yep.
Like
so basically, what we have
uncle
here,
on Thanksgiving.
We have the Defenders. They fought the Omegatron. They fought Nebulon, the Celestial Man. They fought the Headmen, the Elf with a Gun, Mutant Force.
Oh my God!
Scorpio. All these villains. They've saved the world. They survived Tunnel World, and now they're using their powers to go grocery shopping and fix the TV antenna on top of the roof.
There you go. And we have Kyle woken up by Dolly. This is the day of his court date. We cut to Daredevil in captivity inside a bank vault. That's all we know.
And we're promised that next issue and the next episode of Defenders Dialogue, the Mandrill comes to town.
Unfortunately. Now, I would like to point out one thing, Brian. At this point, Ed Hannigan has taken over the letters page of Daredevil. Of Defenders. This issue, maybe the previous issue, and the next couple, Hannigan is the one responding or writing notes. And it begins with a note from him about David Anthony Kraft working with him on this issue. And then it says, and speaking of the old order changing, it's going to happen again. As of issue 92, Defenders will have a brand spanking new scripter with a whole new approach. You'll be hearing more about that next issue, but don't despair. I'll be back with a new feature, which I plan to both pencil and write, etc., etc. So, interestingly, by this point, several issues beforehand, they've already planned the transition.
That's right. Now, we should talk about that transition as far as it relates to this show. Chris is going to be on an extended vacation for most of June.
Well, partly also business travel, Brian. I'm going to be giving the keynote speech at the International Vampire Film and Arts Festival in Sighiswara, Transylvania, in Romania.
That's right. You call it business travel. I call that a vacation.
Well, it'll be fun regardless.
So what we're going to do, next week's episode, we're going to wrap up Ed Hannigan's run. That's issues 90 and 91. So it'll be a short show. We don't want to get into J.M. DeMantis' run until Chris is back. So after next week's wrap-up of issues 90 and 91, I'm going to do one or two shows. I don't want to talk about them in advance. I want you to be surprised. But you'll have me solo for 2 episodes. And then Chris will be back, and we will get into one of the greatest runs in Marvel Comics history.
We may be building it up too much, but as horror guys...
Hell no. Have you gone back and reread them?
Yeah, I read them recently.
I mean, it holds up, man. I still, especially like the Six-Fingered Hand and the Squadron Supreme, Squadron Sinister. I read that and I'm like, yeah, this is it right here. This is where I picked up every influence that I've used in my own career. Null the Living Darkness, I completely ripped that off with Darkness on the Edge of Town. Didn't realize it until going back and rereading this.
All right. Well, yes, certainly very influential for us. We're over time, so we're going to wrap it up.
That's right. Before we do that, one more time, I want to thank Serial Box, the HBO for readers, for sponsoring this week's show. They have all kinds of genres, all kinds of serials. You can start listening or reading today at serialbox.com. That's SERIAL box.com. 1 monthly fee, just like Netflix, and you can start listening or reading today. We want to thank, of course, our host, the Project Entertainment Network. If you're on Patreon, please consider stopping by their Patreon and throwing them $1 or $2. That way you're supporting this show. You're supporting Chris's other podcast, Three Guys with Beards, my other podcast, The Horror Show with Brian Keene. And, of course, a reminder, we're available for free on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and all other platforms. Thanks to our engineer, Tommy Clark. Be sure to check out his podcast, The Necrocasticon. They're back now with brand new episodes, by the way. By the way, Chris, that reminds me.
Yes.
I know we're in overtime here, but I heard from Tommy last week. We got the monthly ratings for the month of March. And do you know that Defenders Dialogue actually beat your show, Three Guys with Beards, in the ratings?
Well, that's not difficult because we haven't done an episode of Three Guys with Beards probably in a month anyway.
I know. I wasn't going to bring that up.
I know you weren't. Yeah. No, we've done, I think, 5 episodes in 5 months. So at the moment, Three Guys with Beards is a monthly show. But
do you need a guest host? I've got a beard now. I can fill it.
Well, I think that we need to have. I want to actually have my son Daniel guest co-host at some point coming up. So we shall see.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We will see you next week.
Excelsior!
Do you love comic books and consider yourself a die-hard fan? Then you need to listen to Parlapod. We have news, reviews, and interviews with your favorite pros, all while bringing some serious laughs. New episodes drop every Wednesday in time for New Comic Book Day. Parlapod is available on the Project Entertainment Network, all major podcast outlets, and parlapod.com. Tune in and fuel your fandom with Parlapod.
Three Guys with Beards.
The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Inkstain's Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method Monster Attack.
Necrocasticon.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club podcast.
Kazan.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.